Good morning. My name is Kevin Carpenter, volunteer at CppCon, back again in 2020. It's been an interesting year. I'm fortunate to have Klaus Iglberger with me again to talk about his class that he's got coming up at the conference, which, as everybody may know by now, is going to be virtual. And that means that training classes will also be virtual. And so, Klaus, I know we did an introduction before last year, but hopefully we'll have some new people watching. So go ahead and give us your 2-minute spiel, if you will, about yourself. We'll start with that.
So good morning, Kevin, first of all, and thanks for having me. So my name is Klaus Iglberger. I'm a freelancing C++ trainer, and as such, I'm doing a workshop again at CppCon. So I've been doing C++ training since approximately 2016, and since then, the work has been growing, so I'm doing approximately 20 to 30 training classes every year now. So I should say used to do, thanks to the Corona crisis, this number unfortunately has gone down, but okay, that's what it should be. Right.
Yep, yeah, for sure. I mean, everybody's trying to adapt, but I think that can be some. So let's look at the icing on that cake, or the silver lining. So when it comes to doing remote training, a lot of companies, when you normally get brought out onto an on-site, the company brings you out so that you can train a group of people, right? And so for a company, that's a little bit more of a considerable cost, where this year will be virtual. And so it should be actually more cost effective for a single person from a company or a couple people to come join, correct?
That is absolutely correct. This is also why I think this year's CppCon is a tremendous opportunity. So joining the conference is now, or participating is $300, I believe. And there is no hotel cost, no flight cost for many people. So there should be more people than ever before.
Yeah, the travel cost. Yeah, the travel cost is definitely reduced as well. And I know the technology that we're going to look at using is going to be Remo for the conference participants, which, as I've been looking at, looks really interesting, because you actually have tables where you can sit at, and so you can talk to each other, just kind of like if you were in that virtual situation. So from you doing a training class, though, what kind of technology are you looking to use for doing the remote training?
So Remo is unfortunately too focused on conferences. For that purpose, it's perfect. But for a workshop, well, I'm using Zoom, a simple Zoom meeting, which works up to 50 people. So from a technology point of view, you should be good. There is the opportunity for breakout rooms as well. If there's a small group of people that wants to talk about a particular topic, while others do some hands-on programming exercise, so Zoom should give us everything we need. It's also something that everybody can use. Everybody can install the Zoom player or Zoom client. And so everybody should be able to participate really easily.
Yeah, I will say the one thing I do like about Zoom is that it does seem to work everywhere. I mean, as we've been talking, I have it running on a Linux laptop at the moment. We have it running on, iPhones. You can use it out of the web. And so it definitely gives you a lot of options. So I will say it's great that it'll handle up to 50 for your class, because I know last year, myself and actually 2 of my colleagues from the office took your class, and you must have had, I think, almost 30 people in the classroom. It seemed to be a good turnout last year.
It definitely was. It was a surprisingly large number of people. Apparently the topic is pretty attractive.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because I can see why. I mean, for me, I actually came from more of a background as an application writer, especially on the Windows side. And so at least for me and my programming experience, I hadn't used a lot of templates. I'm a bit more self-taught. I haven't seen a lot of design patterns, right off the bat. And so going through your class, it wasn't just the design patterns. I need to be clear. It's like, as much as it's a design pattern class, it was probably one of the more hands-on classes that I've taken at CppCon. I've been taking classes since 2018. I've taken almost 2 classes a year each year. And a lot of them were hands-on, and yours especially was, which I found very helpful, because the way that you would present, so when you presented, for example, the visitor pattern, not just where we would use it, but the old style of how it was done versus the modern style. and then actually working through those examples in class. Are you finding, so two questions to that. One is that, you know, more of a comment, that it gave me more to take back because you're actually doing the work. And I felt the way you provide the content was, I was able to use it in my workplace. But then my question to that is, do you find that you're effective still being able to, like when a person has questions on the code that they're doing, or have you had to adjust the class for those live examples?
I had to adjust it a little bit. So in an on-site training, I can say, okay, for the next half hour, we do this programming exercise, and then I can walk around, try to help people when they're stuck. This is very hard online. So I had to adapt a little bit. The training classes are now a little shorter, or in other words, I try to redesign them such that I can do them in smaller steps. So let's do this for 10 minutes. If there's any questions, please ask. Then after 10 minutes, we talk about the first step, then hopefully everybody's on board again. Then we do the next 10 minutes, the next 10 minutes, etc., until everybody is has hopefully come to a solution in the end. My experience is, since I'm doing online classes since March by now, that this works pretty well and that people like it, that some people even claim this is much easier because you can do this at home and you can still follow everything. But of course, it's still not the on-site experience from my point of view. Yeah, so, yeah.
No, so as I'm sitting and thinking about that, excuse me, there were definitely spots in the class where, you know, my partner, Jeff, he had done a bit more templating than I had. And so, you know, I can see where breaking it apart into those smaller pieces might be more helpful to a lot of people, especially if it's new content, because then you're getting those individual steps, which gives you a chance to make sure you're keeping up with the class. And then you as a trainer, it gives you the opportunity to make sure more people are, you know, along lines with where you're going. So that's really cool to see how you've adapted that. So, you know, I know that I remember a lot of the content from the design patterns that we went through last year, but then you've added some new stuff this year as well, correct?
Correct. So I tried to extend it in all dimensions, kind of. So first of all, I wanted to improve the experience that people had, although many people already reported it was good. But I really tried to improve the way I drive home the message. That's the major message of the class, which is essentially modern C++ is not just turning on C++ 17 or even C++ 20. There's definitely more. There's an entire philosophy behind this. And if you really want to do modern C++, you have to rethink the way you do it. The classical ways still work, but there's always a better solution. I shouldn't say always, but there is very often a better solution in modern C++ that is usually faster, easier, and also so easier to understand, but also easier to write. So this is something I definitely improved, hopefully. I extended a couple of topics that I felt were perhaps too short. Afterwards, I got questions that I now introduced into the training class itself. For instance, there is now more content on the singleton pattern, how to refactor singletons. So there is an entirely new program exercise about singletons. I also added a couple of other, I shouldn't say design patterns. So for instance, I will talk about state machines too, because once you know how to use these new ways of thinking, you can use this for more cases too. So we talked about variant, which can indeed use pretty nicely for simple state machines. And a major point is always design. So hopefully I also extended this a little bit, talking about the things, why are the design patterns helping? Why is the modern approach better? So how does it decouple things? How can people really more easily get to a solution? Yeah, and so I think I extended it in all kinds of dimensions, hopefully.
Excellent. I was going to say, you know, you talked about state machine, and there were definitely the state machine. I remember the singleton pattern that we did last year, as well as the visitor pattern. I know that all three of those items ended up somewhere in our code base at our company between myself, my manager, and my partner. So you definitely get takeaways that you're going to we definitely got takeaways we were able to use in the class. That was for sure. So do you have a talk this year that you're giving?
I'm even so lucky to have 3 talks this year. For the very first time, I submitted 4 because I anticipated that due to Corona, there would be changes, and I wanted to have at least 1. They selected 3 of those.
They say that's the curse of submission. You
Yes.
win the ones you want when you don't expect.
Yeah, exactly. So I will do a talk in the Back to Basics track again, which is about exceptions. So there was a talk about exceptions last year. This time I want to focus on a couple of different aspects. So I want to focus on the disadvantages and of course then also advantages of exceptions. So when to use them, when not to use them, what are the alternatives? I want to focus on the problems also. What is the problems of exceptions? Why can people not use it? This is something that especially beginners, I believe, want to know. And I will focus a little bit more on the design, how to use exceptions properly. So how to design the code such that you can work with exceptions well. The second talk that was accepted, actually also proposed for the Back to Basics session, is about calling functions. So what is the individual steps that are taken when you call a function, like name lookup, overload resolution, etc., which I find is a pretty interesting topic, very well suited for Back to Basics, but just didn't make it this year. So in the Back to Basics session, it was still accepted. And the third talk is about the solid principles. This is something that I use a lot when I talk about design. I always try to rationalize a decision by saying it adheres to the single responsibility principle or open-close principle. But I realize that this is hard when people do not really well know what these principles are about. And so in this talk, I try to highlight what these 5 principles are truly about. I try to get rid of a couple of misconceptions and hopefully also give examples that show it's not just for object-oriented code, but for all kinds of code that you could possibly write. So it's a set of universal design guidelines.
Excellent. I remember the solid principles a little bit. I did not take away as much from that in the class last year. So, in talking of, well, speaking of talks, if somebody wants to see your style of teaching too, you had your Back to Basics talk on loop semantics from last year, which was a 2-part. And I will say, at least, having taken the class, because I think our class last year was a pre-class, and then seeing your talk, if someone wants to get an example of your teaching style, I think that's a good example, because I again, even that talk as a Back to Basics was really well done.
I would agree. It's not a workshop, of course, but still, it is a pretty good example of how I would teach. Yes.
And your point there of it not being a workshop, because you ended up going over move semantics, I remember, with us for a bit inside the class itself. And yes, the detail that we get in the classes compared to what is in a talk, as well as the interactive, being able to ask questions a lot easier, is it's worth the wait of the class. I mean, that's why you take the class. So
yes. Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to add before we call it?
Oh, I definitely like to see a lot of people again. Yeah, I believe it's a very interesting topic, something that will help you. And don't be afraid that it's an online class. I actually believe this is not a downside or disadvantage. It should work just as well as you would be on site. There's just less interaction with other participants. This is unfortunate, but there's something that we cannot change, unfortunately.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll all come out with a lot more technology and experience, which then we can even apply again when next year comes around. So, again, trying to find the silver lining on where we are at today. I appreciate your time. I will say this morning, though I know it's your afternoon. So I appreciate your time today. And if I get the opportunity, maybe I can drop in on your class.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thanks for your time.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Klaus.